What if health research and clinical trials were seamless, efficient, and patient-centric? What if recruitment for these trials was no longer a daunting task, but a streamlined and accessible process? What is it actually like today, and what could the future be? And what stands in the way of making this a reality? We could be using technology to its fullest potential to enhance clinical trial recruitment and efficiency. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Anthony Murray, Head of Growth at Opyl, who are revolutionising health research and clinical trials using their digital-focused recruitment platform Opin and AI-driven analysis portal TrialKey. And in this episode, we talk about why Australian patients and trial participants are facing fewer opportunities to contribute than ever, why medical and digital literacy remain significant barriers for trial participation, and how health researchers underestimate some key element in the trial recruitment process, which ends up wasting a lot of money. Collaboration starts with a conversation. Team HealthTech, let's make it happen. This is Talking HealthTech with me, Peter Birch, featuring content and community about technology in healthcare. Hey, Anthony, how are you?
Hi, Pete. Very good.
Good. Yes, super duper. Great to be talking to you here on the Talking HealthTech podcast. And it's great to be able to check in on the work happening with Opyl and other parts that you're operating within the ecosystem as well. Introduce yourself, set the scene, tell us a bit more about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you. Great to talk with you. Anthony Murray, English accent. I've been very lucky to be in Australia for 10 years. I spent 11 with Global Data Life Sciences, so a data analytics company that work across various different levels of innovation and investment. Spent some time with a Sydney CRO and a fantastic organisation called the Australian Cardiovascular Alliance before joining Opyl almost 2 years ago. So a digital agency to help support recruitment and communication within health research.
Yeah, love it. And I want to dive into that topic a little bit more in this conversation today. Remind us, because Opyl, no strangers to the Talking HealthTech podcast, but explain a little bit more how you're helping solve some of these problems.
Yeah, the number one statistical risk behind health research is sourcing enough volunteers on time or under pre-planned budget. There are different ways traditionally in which we've been able to find volunteers, and that has usually been in the domain of sites, both public and private, who help support clinical trials, both industry and those that are done by universities, hospitals and institutes and others. A new way to be able to help source volunteers beyond those patient lists include advertising, and we're experts in being able to do that through different digital spaces, both through search engines, through digital advertising, so the complete online space from websites to shopping to sports to dating apps to computer games. And then what we do through social media, which some people have found relatively easy, others hugely inefficient, and it's evolving that way over the course of time. So that's what we've been able to do to help communicate health research and clinical trials with empathy and with accuracy.
For someone that may not be familiar with the clinical trial process generally and that tricky problem of recruiting people to participate in them, one might immediately think that, well, a good place to find people would be in healthcare, not in a video game or online. So you mentioned too that that's obviously not enough. Or why can't we just recruit people from within patients from hospitals and clinics?
Oh, that can be done, and usually responsible for good proportions of cohorts required for health research. But we know that well over 80% of the time they're insufficient. One of the cool things about messaging beyond a patient list, participant list, will only be as accurate as the kind of conditions and lived experience that any hospital or clinic will understand about them. One of the great opportunities around using digital channels is that you can help across the personal referral network. Talk about friends and family. It could be colleagues who you might know a little bit about when it comes to lived health experience, and how you might be able to use different messages and hooks to be able to attract them to referrals. Effectively, word of mouth through digital space in order to get messaging across. That can and should involve physicians a lot of the time. That can be obviously personal GPs and specialists that go beyond that. It's up for us to devise technologies that help with that referral network and then connect those people to a screening process and sites, so that it's not just done empathetically again, but it's done in a way that's efficient for both the participant and also the people conducting health research.
I guess I think about how much information people do choose to put online and engage with social medias and other, I put an S at the end of social media, it makes me sound old saying social medias, but the, and other information that's available that then allows this hyper targeting of advertising or information to people generally. I'm much more comfortable with potentially opportunities of, like, say, clinical trials being presented to people that may not have otherwise discovered them being presented versus, gambling and other things that can come up on socials as well. So I guess there's, on one hand, some people's radar or light might go off in terms of where, we're using social media in this health setting to try and get data from them to present trials to them. That it seems like that this is the way that it needs to be done.
I mean, how comfortable do you feel sharing just information about health? It could be kind of day-to-day kind of colds and sniffles or kind of chronic illnesses. How comfortable are you?
Yeah, well, depends who it's with, to be honest.
So we have, I guess, the evolution of different channels and specific platforms that we use, and the adoption of people from different cultures, ethnicities, age ranges mean that, and you're exactly right, what your audience, we have a lot more kind of control over what our audience can be for certain areas. We do, for our projects, we do something called social listening, which is really easy. It's a way to be able to assess what kind of language and kind of framing of health journeys and experiences that people go through and how it's communicated through different channels and social media. And again, this is something else that changes depending on your ethnicity and background. Recently running a project in South America where not just from a dialect perspective, but the way that personal health is communicated differs in Latin American Spanish to Castilian or Google Translate Spanish. So it actually matters to be able to understand not just the technical element of language, but then how it's framed and how we might then be able to reach them in a way that's non-invasive. We insist on not going through kind of private spaces and private groups, but there's still plenty around in what people want to do when they're trying to look for answers, both in how they might go through their own health experience and or how they are dealing or coping with those of the people around them, family, friends, etc.
I think about clinical trials and the role that they play in this broader health innovation landscape. They're really important, and right from pharmaceuticals through to med tech, even into the software side of healthcare technology in different ways. We're an evidence-based kind of industry where anyone and everyone needs the evidence, the proof that the thing's going to do what it's supposed to do, and also that it's safe and ethical. And sometimes a product can't even get out of the gate without having a clinical trial being done for it, or an intervention or whatever it might be.
Yep.
So I would think in this current landscape of rapid expansion of healthcare innovation and new opportunities, and we're living in 2023, are there a lot more clinical trials happening in Australia, or is it less? Which way is the line going?
Yeah, yes and no. So we're seeing a greater diversity of companies that can help support health research and clinical trials, from CROs to specialist consultancy services, and some areas where there are some current skills gaps in Australia. Health economists is just one such example. COVID helped provide the opportunity for Australia to contribute to vaccine studies. But even since before COVID, we have seen, and if we exclude COVID studies, a continuing dip in the studies that Australia is hosting from early to late stage work. That done the analysis and how that compares to other countries yet. And there are probably some interesting economic reasons around why that is. One kind of easy one is what we face in terms of a broader global economic downturn, and therefore the funding that will go into clinical trials and health innovation, which is still a relatively risky thing for smaller investors. That could mean fewer opportunities for those who are willing to contribute. On the flip side of that, we know that there are many more people who are interested to participate in clinical trials that actually do, and there are some barriers to participation. There are a few of these, and they're complex. One of them is language and accessibility. So when anybody from sponsors to sites explain and want to attract people around clinical trials through whatever it might be, newspaper, TV, internet. And we know that medical literacy doesn't always match how people are explaining both the advantage and what it might mean to participate in clinical trials. So one of the cool things we've done to help with that is launch the world's first registry with accessible language. So we're using ChatGPT models in order to reframe language information on specific clinical trials into an online registry. So people can find this on opin.ai. So that's opin.ai, with some easy search tools that mimic a lot of not just medical literacy, but digital literacy. That is to say, different tools and platforms that we use every day to make it easier to search for certain health research projects and clinical trials. And from there, look at what it might take to actually contribute to some of those. So we work with some companies to directly advertise for some of those clinical trials. There are well over 80,000 of those, I think, if memory serves, on the platform at the moment, and we certainly don't work with all of those. But we're trying to basically set a precedent around how we think health research should be communicated in a way that's not just technologically efficient, but generally and genuinely meets the demands of the population's standard medical literacy.
Well, that's an interesting point, isn't it? On one hand, it's really important that the requirements of a clinical trial and what who the participants are and what pre-existing conditions they have, if any, and what star sign they are and favorite food and color and things like that. The hyper, specific requirements that are needed for a clinical trial, to then, and the purpose of doing that, I imagine, is to then have data that is supposed to be representative of in the end, the people who'll be using such intervention. But you got two problems that you've kind of unpacked a little bit already, is that if people don't know in the first place that the thing exists and it's not communicated in a way that they know what's in it for them, or even that the thing is within their wheelhouse of stuff they need to know about. But then if if it's such a clean data set of people, like, life isn't that clean. People have multi-morbidities, people have complexities. It makes sense in theory, I guess, in terms of this trial process of like, let's put together what these people might be. But in the end, if we're actually trying to do something that's supposed to be representative of the population, we might be missing the mark.
Yeah, I'm totally bang on. Scientists and researchers far smarter than I, who put together a plan, synopses, and then protocols on clinical trials and health research. The best ones consider lived experience.
Cool.
There are broader conversations around co-design, that is to say, how to incorporate the direct feedback of participants who have either experienced conditions and or health research and clinical trials in that space, and use their feedback into the plan. This isn't done enough. There are good conversations being done around how this could be done more. And there's some fantastic professionals in Australia who are fantastic advocates for this. So that is kind of the ideal, where it assumes who specific cohorts and those living with certain conditions, those certain economic and income backgrounds, alongside then what we can do to improve diversity, which should be a business essential, not just good ethic. And that's something where we're blessed in Australia, whilst acknowledging my space as a white Anglo immigrant male and my privilege, but the inaccessibility of health research, not just on the back of medical literacy, but for those who have limited accessibility because of limited income opportunities, kind of greater focus when it comes to childcare and many other kind of complex issues beyond that. So these are just some. There are kind of many, many more issues and factors that appeal into why people might be interested, but what are their capacity to actually contribute, and what are the demands of health research when it comes to site visits, when it comes to recording information around something they might be taking in trialing. Their altruism, everybody has a capacity when it comes to our day-to-day life and experience. So that's what we try and bring a focus to when we talk to sponsors around protocols and inclusion-exclusion criteria.
You talked about the importance of accessibility and co-design and working with those participants to create something that's meaningful and inclusive and has outcomes, and that's super important in the clinical trial space. I think more broadly about healthcare and life sciences and digital health. These are common kind of, issues for us to address across the spectrum. And I know that, you're involved across the broader industry as well in life sciences, particularly in New South Wales here. Tell me a little bit more about the stuff you're doing with Bio New South Wales now.
Yeah, so I'm very proud and delighted to collaborate with Dr. Brad Walsh, who is the CEO of Glithrix and Minoic in Sydney, and well known in his sector, and I've collaborated with him to form Bio New South Wales. There are, when you look at some other states and Australia as a country, groups who advocate for industry and help connect and celebrate innovation. In Victoria, there's Bio Melbourne Network. In Queensland, there's Life Sciences Queensland. And AusBiotech also represents a group that for life sciences nationally. Bio New South Wales fits nicely in terms of ethic around what those organisations try to do in their spaces. We have the advantage of being relatively young, but also with one of Australia's largest broader economy, with more of a disparate geographical sense of different innovation hubs from Westmead to Redfern and Eveleigh, all the way down to Wollongong and up to Newcastle. So whilst it'll be slightly more difficult to help physically connect, but in terms of the chasm between larger companies who call Sydney their home and then innovators and startups and researchers out of fantastic institutes and universities more locally, we have a fantastic opportunity to help connect and raise a standard by which people can help commercialize fantastic innovations. We've already started that with a launch in August. And we have an industry-wide end-of-year organisation which we are co-hosting with AusBiotech, with ARCS Australia, and with MTP Connect, which will be on December 7th at the Intercontinental in Sydney. So for anybody who would love to come along there and meet people from all over the industry, from services to innovators to biotech and medtech, very welcome. There are links through on our LinkedIn, so Bio New South Wales, our LinkedIn page, alongside those of AusBiotech and ARCS Australia to register for that event.
Love it. Well, we'll make sure those details and that link is in the show notes for this episode for people to check out. And then longer, thinking about, beyond that launch and the industry night and the stuff there, you touched on, the problems to solve in this for there's members or participants in the Bio New South Wales community. You touched on commercialization. Is that the kind of focus here?
Yeah, totally. We hope that all great new ideas about products, be they drugs or devices, medtech, digital health, we hope that they're all judged by the actual kind of content of their character. Yeah. So the strength of their IP and their uniqueness. That's not always the case. And so there are different standards based on kind of support networks that are known or unknown to help get usually young people from a point of an idea through to an established business and routes to investment, and ways that they can help develop, test, and then launch their products to market. So one of the elements that Bio New South Wales will try to do, and there are some kind of nice connections to my other hat with Opyl, around what that tide is and what those standards of commercial support are. There are in New South Wales some fantastic organisations. Cicada is one such example that help with collaborations on courses that support business basics and how to get people from 0 to 60, as it were. So for anybody looking for ideas and support, Cicada is one example. There are others. We hope to be able to create a digital platform that people can initially walk effectively through a corridor of the different kind of services they can get locally, to help support them in getting set up. So we'll look forward over the course of next year to be able to help deliver that and support people with fantastic ideas in Sydney.
Yeah, I love it. As a Sydney sider myself, that resonates with me, and we've done a feature episode of what's happening in Wollongong and the innovation there, and I visited the team out in Liverpool at the Ingham and Westmead. So these innovation centres in New South Wales, it's great to be able to bring those different parts together, and that resonates nicely with the way I think around Talking HealthTech. So that's really cool. Thinking then back to Opyl for a second as we reflect on the discussion and those that think, well, participating in a clinical trial, it would be nice if I kind of knew that these things existed. Like, what advice do you have for those that are actively interested in participating in a clinical trial, whether it just be for being through the process or perhaps from a because there's people that participate in clinical trials because, previous interventions weren't successful. So how do you get involved?
The short version of the answer, because there's a long discussion around that, the short version, there are some fantastic Australian patient advocacy groups. Many of them feature research advocacy as well. That is to say, they have fantastic representation and support for those going through either clear and known or relatively obscure and unknown routes for diagnosis and healthcare. Secondary to that, as hopefully is obvious a net benefit to those living with certain conditions and the opportunity to get in front of new either therapies, prophylactics, devices that are going to help them through different health journeys. That many of those patient advocacy groups feature research advocacy and help connect to health research. Opyl have fantastic connections to a few of these already. PanCare and Neuroendocrine Cancer Australia were two such examples of these, and kind of a huge kind of disparate scope of different oncology pathways and experiences that we've been able to help connect to. So that's an area where Opyl are moving not just into advertising for health research, but also building communities and online digital hubs that will help educate not on patient advocacy, but specifically to how people can help find and understand health research, both from the perspective of risks to then either burden and or what it would mean to participate in these, and how people can find and get access to clinical trials based on who they are, where they are, their capacity, their digital literacy, and many other different factors. There's no short answer, but there are some great companies. They're trying to make a difference in the space and do it in a way that's open, empathetic, clear, and accurate. And we're lucky to be one of them.
Well, Anthony, look, I'll put the details for Opyl in the show notes of this episode for people to check out. And of course, you've got the directory listing on the Talking HealthTech website as a THT Plus member. I'll make sure the information for Bio New South Wales is there too for those looking to participate, whether it be at the end of the year event or into 2024 and beyond as well. So I really appreciate you coming on and having a chat about these important topics, mate. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pete. Thanks for having me on.
For more content and community about technology and healthcare, visit talkinghealthtech.com.